We entrepreneurs are always looking for a way we can get a competitive advantage and do something innovative and get ahead. Well, I've got a treat for you as I had a chance to interview Dan Keldsen. He's a co-founder of a wonderful company, has a great product called Plexicam, and he gives us some insights from the many entrepreneurs he's talked to. You're going to want to take some notes on this one. It is that good. That's what our episode is about this time on Stark Raving Entrepreneurs. Welcome to Stark Raving Entrepreneurs, where you discover how to achieve your goals and dreams, getting the freedom you want, all while living voluntarily, peacefully, and with a live and let live lifestyle. The job of being an entrepreneur gives a lot of fun and a lot of excitement and sometimes a little bit scary. And there's ways that you can use technology to give yourself an advantage. And today, I got a treat for you. We're going to talk to someone who's come out with a product that his company is offering that's helping people to really increase that human connection when we're talking about video, how to humanize the virtual experience even more. And he is joining us right now. His name is Dan Keldsen. He's with a company called Plexicam that gives a way for people to connect. We'll tell you more about that. But Dan, thanks for being with us today.
Yeah, Terry, great to be on.
Well, I know that you have been an entrepreneur and you kind of came into it from an accidental point of view, something you hadn't planned. You had training formally in music and you've done a little bit with technology, but tell us a little bit about your journey as an entrepreneur and how that all came about.
Yeah, I think I may have been the prototype stark raving entrepreneur that
There you
your
go.
new business is based on.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think like a lot of people, going to college, you never know what you're going to do on the other side, or at least a lot of people end up in that situation. There's some people that go to business school or law school or something like that, and they definitely had a specific purpose. I came to Boston to go to Berklee College of Music and become a rock star. And of course, well, you had your video rock stars group, which I presented to early in the days of Plexicam. Thank you for
Yes.
that. But it actually turned out that I did not want to be a rock star, because that meant moving to New York and LA and like going fist fights to get on stage and try to survive, right? And I was not built for that. So I was really more interested in the collaboration side of being part of a band, group of friends that really enjoyed working together, creating fun music, interesting stuff. And I decided instead, once I graduated, to turn that into my other love, which was technology. And that's when I met Tom, my partner in Plexicam. I was the first IT guy that he hired in 1994 in his company at the time, which still exists, Delphi Group. And that was my first exposure to business. It was a small company. We were a startup, and I had no idea what really to expect, because none of my family had a background in doing startups or being entrepreneurs necessarily. So I really had no idea what I was getting into. I don't know if that was an advantage or a disadvantage. I think it's kind of both directions, to be honest. But I learned a ton through Tom and Carl, his co-founder, who later co-founded a company with me. And I could have never predicted that was going to happen. And then I stayed at that company for 10 years. We were acquired by Perot Systems, which is for people like us who have a certain age or above. Infamously, the two-time billionaire, two different companies, because the first time wasn't enough for him, and ran for president. And I did vote for him. I did not have a chance to meet him in person, or at least I wasn't able to meet him in person. But there could not be a bigger difference between Perot Systems, which is a publicly held company, 15,000 people, and our little team that had been acquired was 15 to 20 people. Totally different. Most of Perot's people were ex-military. Almost all of them are ex-military of one kind or another. None of us were ex-military. So it was such a jarring, shocking experience that's part of the reason I decided I never wanted to be part of a big company again. And I parted ways with that. And then I started working with other startups. And almost every time that I either joined a new startup or created my own for the first time was during an economic downturn, which is a little bit scary, but it actually turns out, if you look at the stats, the best time to start a business is during an economic downturn, because there's basically it can't go lower if you want
Yeah.
to flip it upside down like that.
Exactly. And usually that is the best time. And by the way, for those of you watching this, as we're recording this now, we are looking at recession. We've had more than the 2 quarters, the downturn that they've said, and we're seeing that can be rough. And sometimes we can think, oh, woe is me. But wait a minute, Dan is right. This is when things are happening because a lot of competitors are then out of the market. They've gone,
Right.
prices have gone down because people are saying, gee, we got to cut prices here to sell more. When you do it the right way, it can really help you move forward. Well, one of the things that I really like about what you and Tom are doing with Plexicam is you've got a tool there that helps humanize the virtual connection with video. And it's something that I had been talking about before I heard about you. And when our mutual friend Steve Shapiro connected us and I saw what you were doing, I thought, this is amazing. It's a tool that can really help. Now, if you haven't, those of you listening to this, if you haven't seen this, haven't looked into it, you want to do it. I'm going to have Dan himself tell us a little bit about the advantages of using a tool like Plexicam, what it does, and the advantages for connecting with humans better with that.
Sure. Yeah. So, among other accidents in my career, I never thought I would own a product company that manufactures its own goods that are sold worldwide during a global pandemic. So that was also not something I anticipated. And for those of you who are watching, I'm holding up our nearly invisible Plexicam, which is always fun on camera. So it's essentially, if you think of it as the exact opposite of a tripod, it doesn't stand from the ground. It hangs over the top of your screen. It's as invisible as we can make it, which is pretty invisible. It's a very see-through acrylic. You put a good quality camera, whatever that means to you. I happen to have a hideously expensive camera on my Plexicam that I'm using. This is a Lumina, also very good, 4K, a very small Logitech Brio like Terry's using. The smaller the camera, the better. It does sit in front of your monitor, so we cannot shrink your camera. Unfortunately, I wish we could. That'd be worth a lot more money, frankly, and that'd be lovely.
We need to get that technology. Get your people working on that one.
So, but the point is that so eye contact doesn't happen unless you're looking at the lens or really close to it. And you can be taught, you can train yourself how to look at a camera lens, but it's more than just looking at like if you're doing the news, you don't need to see the reaction of a million people that might be watching you, right? That it would be impossible to do that actually. But if you're presenting or interviewing like we're doing here today, you want to be able to not just it appear that the person you're talking to is looking at you, but you can see as the person speaking what the reaction is that you're getting. So you know if, or at least you hopefully know that they're bored or they're upset or there's some reaction that you're getting from them. Hopefully the reaction that you're hoping for.
Yeah.
And it's, it's funny because Tom and I are both, we tend towards pretty high tech things. This is remarkably simple, low tech. Ironically, I can't believe the first product company I have is this low tech, but it's meant to be as simple as possible, as invisible as we can make it. So we can literally, our product disappears and you can just focus on doing whatever that it is that you do, marketing, content creation, sales, whatever. You should focus on that. We're just trying to make it easier for you to do that and to take away some of the complexity and a lot of the expense from other solutions like tripods and teleprompters.
Yep. I think you're doing a great job. And what you and Tom are doing is putting together a tool, a very simple tool, actually, but it takes a lot of thinking to put that together. And it helps people to connect because those of you watching this, for instance, I'm looking right now into my camera, so I can see that very easily. But now, you ever been one of those messages where they're talking to you like this and they're over here and they're looking over this way and you're going, hey, my eyes are over here. Look at me like this. Well, when you have Plexicam, you're able to correct that. And I think to humanize that is so important. And I see others are doing that in many different ways. Dan, you get a chance to tap into the genius of many entrepreneurs around the world that you're talking to. I want to find out while we've got you here, what are some of the things that you see entrepreneurs doing really well, even in the midst of the crazy world we've got right now with all the real world issues that are happening that are not pleasant? How are the best doing it? What are they doing to survive and to thrive in today's market?
Yeah. So I have another interview series that I do called Next Future Today, which I came up with the idea in March of 2020. If you remember that, that's when everything, went to a standstill and we all stayed locked up in our houses. I asked a whole bunch of executives, what happened to the plan that you had on January 1st, 2020 as that plan survived contact with the enemy, as the military saying goes, were you like, there's some companies that are really built to be innovative, and they're constantly looking on ways to dart and weave and take advantage of, opportunities that arise. There are others that take forever to make decisions. Big companies, that's part of what I didn't like about being an employee of a big company. So what I found, the most successful entrepreneurs who decided to take action is the biggest thing. You could think all day long about, well, if we had thought about doing this before COVID happened, then we'd be all set, because then we'd have that. Well, you didn't, so who cares? But if you have that idea, one of the things that's really interesting, and Steve Shapiro also talks about, you can have plenty of ideas, but unless you take action, it really doesn't matter. The having the idea is not the problem. It's actually doing something about it, and doing it quickly. I have seen faster innovation happen in the last 2 years than I'd ever seen before. And I used to do innovation consulting all the time. That's part of the reason I had met Steve. And that's so the time from an idea to implementing it in some way, not getting too hung up and having it be super polished, which I think is something that you espouse as well. You just got to get started, and we're all learning all the time. At least I hope so. That's a huge part of being an entrepreneur. You need to be willing to recognize and not hide from the fact that there's probably a whole bunch of stuff that you're going to need to do coming up that you didn't think you needed to know. Like, we don't ship through boats, but when boats get stuck in the canal and brings the entire world to its knees and costs like $100 billion worth of damage, that's stuff that you couldn't have anticipated it necessarily, but how do you deal with it?
Absolutely. And those of you who are joining us, we're talking to Dan Keldsen from Plexicam. And what he said is really important. I'm going to reemphasize that and put an exclamation mark behind it. You don't know what's going to happen, but taking action is the key. Sitting around going, well, let's plan that again. I have heard of people that do that. Yeah. Not that I would ever do anything like that, taking too long to plan. No, not at all. Guilty. Yeah. And so what we got to do is get out there and take action. Do it in a smart way, and don't do it where you're going to risk losing life. You don't want to do that. What you want to do is have lots of different plans. I remember they talked about the Alabama football coach, Bear Bryant. He would always have many different plans and options. So he had not just a plan A or B, but a C, D, E, F, and G, and sometimes even more. So that if one thing didn't happen, which was normal on playing college level football, those kind of things are going to happen. And what Dan just said is really important. This is what people are doing. Well, Dan, let me ask you this: again, tapping into the entrepreneurs you're talking to and what you're seeing in the business world today, what do we see that was working before, was working real well, but it's not working right now? And how are the smartest entrepreneurs pivoting and jumping over to make things happen today?
Yeah. So I think certainly for sort of medium and larger size organizations, social media has been seen as something to stay away from for a long time. Like, I've been on LinkedIn since the first year it existed, which is a different story that we can talk about sometime. I actually thought it was just a fad. It was going to go away, and it turned out to be a huge portion of my professional career. Same with Twitter. For a while, I was one of the top 10 Twitter users in the Boston area, which I just happened to be living on it for a while early on. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to sustain, I will say that. Same thing with like TikTok, for example. It's like the most addictive social media platform that's ever existed, which to a certain extent I don't like, because that's, it's a dangerous sinkhole for your time potentially. But it also, to the point of what we we're just talking about with, start with something and iterate on it. It's a perfect platform to, you just grab your phone, shoot some video that's 10 seconds or something, and see what happens. Does anybody react to that? Actually, we had a client whose username is Drunk Real Estate on TikTok.
Now that's interesting. We will remember that one.
Yeah. That's the only reason I remember it, because I'm not usually good with names. But she had been a client for maybe 6 months or so, and she is a real estate agent, commercial, residential, very successful, and she was developing a following. So she did an over-the-shoulder shot. People keep asking about my setup. I don't know if they were or not. We all do things like this, but she had a massive screen, like a 49-inch wide curved screen, Plexicam, with a Brio right in the middle of it. And in contrast, the Brio looked like a little speck of dust, which I thought was pretty funny. But it was like a 30-second video, maybe. Lots of people, as it turns out, saw that. It was the most watched video she had ever created. I talked to a lot of the people who bought as a result of seeing that video. They were not, none of them were following her. So
Wow.
it was the algorithm at work that figured out whatever it was that happened. The algorithm is never going to know who to point your direction if you're not there in the first place. So I think
That's
that's one of the
tweetable,
biggest. Yeah, I think it is. I should have thought about that years ago. But if I have a very good friend of mine. He loves the idea of sustainability and alternative energy and the societal impacts of that and the environmental impacts. And we've talked about it a lot. And I said, unless you put that out there somewhere outside of you and me talking over dinner, nobody's ever going to know that you care about that and that you have experience in it. So please write or turn on your camera or do something.
I like that.
Yeah, it's so there were opportunities. I'm usually an early adopter on most technology things. I was not an early adopter of TikTok, and I'm still not really producing anything on TikTok. But that's just one example of, unless you tried the experiment, there's actually a lot of business oriented things being done on TikTok, and it's a very ripe and growing field. Any concerns about China aside, there's a lot of opportunity that I think is worth exploring.
Wow, Dan, this is golden information. I'm glad we're getting a transcript of this as well. And those of you watching this is really good information. The kinds of things that we got to do, get out there and take those risks. Try it and look at TikTok and think about what he said with drunk real estate. Well, there's some people going to be visiting that Twitter handle and seeing what she's doing. But I compliment her. If drunk real estate ever watches this, we're high-fiving you for the work that you're doing, getting out there and making it happen. And I think that's the key. You don't just sit back and think about someday I'm going to. Well, you don't get paid for someday I'm gonna. You don't get paid for I'm gonna do's. I've heard Gary Vee talk about that, and he said something that's very colorful of what you can do with your gonna do's. And so you can imagine with Gary Vee what that would be. But it's like what we want to do is we want to say, put it in place and take action. Are you going to make mistakes? Oh yeah. And when you do, not if, when you do, you think, okay, whoa, that was really something. Okay, what did we learn from that? And I think that goes back to some of the things that we've talked about. I talk about in some of my presentations what Carol Dweck talks about with the growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. She's a professor out in Stanford, a psychologist, and she talks about that. When things bad happen to you, you can say, oh, gee, look, everything's bad for me. It just goes that way all the time. Just me, I can't do this or that. That is that fixed mindset that is going to hold you back. Instead, same thing happens to a person with a growth mindset, and they say, ooh, that was tough. Okay, what can I learn from that? What can I do to adjust and adapt from that and move forward? So, Dan, as we look toward the future, we're getting toward a new year coming up pretty soon here. If I ask you, reach under your desk there and get your crystal ball. I want you to rub it really well there. Make sure the batteries are operating on that. What do you see happening, say, for real long term, like the next 6 months to 12 months, really long term? What kind of advice are you giving to? What are you hearing from entrepreneurs that you work with?
Yeah, so that's interesting. If I knew I needed my crystal ball, I actually I do some contact juggling, which usually involves crystal balls of sort of acrylic balls. Actually, as it turns out, they're slightly dangerous to have sitting around though, because they can set your house on fire if they get caught in a beam of sunlight.
Oh, I did not know that. See, so ladies and gentlemen, we're learning all kinds of new things here talking with Dan.
Don't let your house get set on fire. So it's funny. So when I first started working with Tom, he's a futurist. I didn't know what a futurist was. There's a lot of futurists who get most of the future predictions wrong, and nobody can get them all right. Right. I think I would take forward some of what we've already talked about. The speed is it can be your savior or a killer. If you decide to go slow during times when everything is moving very fast and the opportunities are very sort of free form and yet to be defined, then you're not going to be able to seize on those opportunities. So I have no idea, there might be a new TikTok competitor that comes out of nowhere in the next 6 months. Who knows? But I would definitely think it is interesting that I've seen a lot of companies that did break out of potentially a fixed mindset as an organization and became growth oriented because they saw they had no choice I don't know if I like that aspect of it necessarily, but I do like that it got them to take action. And like I used to see innovation projects that would take they were slated to take 5 to 10 years, which drove me insane at the time. And now large companies have realized that we can actually make changes happen way faster. Like single sign-on security, for those of you who are security geeks, those projects usually took years and years. And I used to be a cybersecurity researcher during the early days of COVID when everybody needed to work from home. They did, like, there was one case, it was like a company of 150,000 employees, I think. They put in place single sign-on in a week. They thought it was going to take 3 years.
A week. Wow.
Yeah. So part of that's the cloud. A huge part of that's the cloud.
Oh,
So
yeah.
how can you break out of legacy IT, for example, and jump straight into the next generation? Which actually the book that Tom and I wrote, The Gen Z Effect, back in 2014, I coined a term called slingshotting, which is actually, instead of, there's some people like me and I think like you who like to be early adopters and keep riding that next wave and keep going and going and going. In some ways, it's smarter to not do that and wait a bit till things are a bit more fully formed, not too long, and then you slingshot yourself forward and you jump into a totally different world where you bypass a bunch of the sort of early fun that always happens during the beta and alpha phases of technology. So speed, I think, is the number one thing. I wouldn't make any predictions about like platforms or something, but speed, video, and just generally being engaged with your clientele and or even the people that you work with.
I like it. I think there's a lot of wisdom in that. And that is something that we all can take to heart as entrepreneurs, as stark raving entrepreneurs that we are, looking at that and saying, okay, we got to get out there and we got to hustle and we're going to make it happen. But we're not going to let you get away without telling us how we can get in touch with you. Someone says, okay, I want to find out more about this Plexicam thing and how I could use that and find out more. What's the best way for them to find out about that, Dan?
Sure. So plexicam.com. It's
please spell that for us real slowly.
Yeah,
Someone might not be speaking English.
It is hard to say sometimes. I've heard plexiclam a fair number of times, which now it's going to be stuck in people's heads. So plexicam, plexicam.com. And by the way, I usually make this offer. I love to meet new people and get connected with people. I do think that LinkedIn is still tremendously unutilized in a professional manner. So if you are interested in finding out more about me or talking about anything, please reach out to me on LinkedIn and I'd be happy to get connected and talk. Just don't pitch me immediately.
Yeah, exactly. And for those that might be listening to this on audio, please spell your name very slowly and carefully so they can find you on LinkedIn.
Sure. So Dan is Dan. Keldsen is Keld, D as in Dan, Sen.
Very good. Well, Dan, it is always a pleasure, my friend, to see you. And I appreciate the real strong words of wisdom that you've given us today. This is important for entrepreneurs to be able to get on there, be willing to try, to be fast. But I'm thinking of Daniel Kahneman's book that he wrote, Thinking Fast and Slow. That
Yeah.
real important, the fast and slow part of it. And by the way, he's a psychologist, but won a Nobel Prize in economics for the way that he thinks. It is that good. And by the way, those of you watching this, if you haven't read that book yet, Thinking Fast and Slow, good one to read. I highly recommend that. Dan, any
Awesome.
final words before we let you run home and take care of things you got to do?
No, I just think, if you've been waiting to do something while you've been watching or listening, consider taking that first step. And like I say in my other interview series, start creating that next future right now, today.
Very good. Dan, thank you for being with us. We greatly appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Terry.
Yes, and for those of you that are here joining us, I want you to know that we've got lots of good information for you. Dan is a man you really want to get to know. Get to know him. From the Plexicam tool is one I would highly recommend look into, see if that's a right fit for you. And follow this guy over there on LinkedIn. He's got a lot of wisdom. He's a good man. And when you find good people, you want to hang on to them. I'm Terry Brock with Stark Raving Entrepreneurs. Thanks for being here. If we can help you out, by all means, get in touch with us at starkravingentrepreneurs.com or bounce over to our YouTube channel of the same name, Stark Raving Entrepreneurs. Thanks for being with us today. We'll look forward to seeing you a little bit later on down the road. Hey, don't stop now. If you like this, we've got even more goodies waiting for you over on the YouTube channel and elsewhere. So come on over there to Stark Raving Entrepreneurs. You'll get a lot of good videos. Oh, and also every Wednesday, we have something you would really like to be a part of. Stark Raving Entrepreneurs has a live session. We do it on Zoom, and you can come over and visit. It's at 4 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. You come over to starkravingevent.com. Register for it there. You'll be able to get the link and know where it is and what's going on. We pack it full of lots of ideas for entrepreneurs to help you to generate more sales, do your marketing better, learn about new technologies that can help you, and you'll love it. So come on over and see us there at starkravingevent.com. We'll look forward to seeing you. Thanks for joining us today, and we'll look forward to seeing you a little bit later.